My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Categories Magazine. You can find us on the web at www.categories.com. Our special guest once again today is my good friend Gar Borras from the Los Angeles-based Guns N' Roses tribute band Appetite for Destruction. Welcome once again, Gar, and we've been discussing some of your favorite albums of all time, and today you wanted to discuss one of my all-time favorites, which is Edgar Winter's third studio album, They All Come Out at Night, which came out November of 1972. So let's get into this. Do you mind telling me how you first kind of, discovered Edgar Winter and how this album in particular came on your radar? Way back.
It's a long time ago.
A lot of people listening to this may not even have heard, have any idea who Edgar Winter is. That's part of the reason we're doing this.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the early 1970s.
Like I said, this album in particular came out November of 1972, and of course the two singles off of this, real big hits, but everybody probably has heard of is Frankenstein and Free Ride. Now, I'm going to give you a little trivia here, see if you know. Which one of those tracks do you think charted higher?
Well, I would imagine Frankenstein, simply because, back in the day, Frankenstein was being played on the radio like a lot.
Yeah, much to my surprise, I would have thought Free Ride would maybe charted higher, but you were right. Frankenstein actually was number one on the Billboard chart back then, and then Free Ride made it as far as number 14 on the Billboard chart.
Yeah, but both songs, it's so trippy because both songs get played.
I mean,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go on. Yeah.
Okay. Both songs get played a lot nowadays. If you're listening, if you're listening to the radio, or they'll pop up in a soundtrack for a movie or a TV show,
or even a commercial. I've seen them like in truck commercials and stuff like that.
Yes, and so both songs have like major staying power.
Yeah.
Which to me. Very few songs from way back then, have lasted in popularity to where they're still being heard today.
Oh yeah.
Led Zeppelin has, a number of songs that have lasted over the years.
Maybe The Who.
Yeah, and The Who, and it really one of those things that kind of are those signature things of a of greatness, are the fact that when somebody writes a piece of music and yet they're still having popularity many decades later, so I think it's one of those measurers that even though people don't really know that much about Edgar Winter, when you think about the fact that Frankenstein and Free Ride are still being played today, that's you can't argue with that. That's a mark of greatness.
That is so true, and I will tell you this. Free Ride is one of my all-time classic rock songs. It is one of the few songs that I really never get tired of hearing, if you can believe that. Because like you said, it's just such a great song. And I will, I'll give you a little funny story on Edgar Winter. Like a lot of people, of course, I've heard Free Ride, I've heard Frankenstein millions of times on the radio. And for most of my life, I'll admit, when I thought of Edgar Winter, those are like the two tracks that come to mind. I probably could name, up until maybe a month ago, I could name probably 3 Edgar Winter songs. But yet the guy's got these 2 iconic songs. And if he was to never tour again, I mean, he's probably making bank just on those 2 songs. I think part of a reason, if you look at Frankenstein, for that song's popularity, back then, Frankenstein being an instrumental track, back in 1972, you didn't have a ton of people releasing instrumental music, and I think it was kind of a rockin' tune, so I think that's part of a reason, there's so much love for it, because at that time in 1972, you didn't have a ton of people releasing instrumental music, so it's kind of like when you listen to it, oh, what's this?
Yeah, they were at the forefront of introducing a lot of different things.
Yeah.
They're instrumental. Another thing is he's the first keyboard player to strap a keyboard.
And do you know, Gar? I was
over
reading.
His back.
He actually not only is that correct, but he actually kind of invented the strap. But kind of a strap keyboard like you're talking about that. It's kind of shaped like a guitar and you wear it around your neck. And I guess he did that for his own benefit of, being able to move around and play on stage a little easier. But Edgar Winter actually, people may not even be aware of that, but he kind of created that.
Yes, yeah, he was at the forefront of, nobody had ever really done that before him. And so, for me, what I was really attracted to was, of course, the stuff that I would hear on the radio.
Yeah.
But I was also attracted to that one time when I was sitting in the living room at my parents' house when I was a kid, and I was watching Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Oh yeah, you'd mentioned that to me.
And they just, I of course I watched that every time it came on, but their show had a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I really kind of picked up on that. Because you would watch other bands and stuff, and they would put on their show, and they would put on really good shows, but it just seemed that that was a thing that he brought to his show. Was there was a pace to his show, and there was a lot of energy. They there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that they would put into their shows. Oh yeah. And as a kid, you're kind of watching that, and you're being a young guy, you're attracted to those kind of things. You're just going, wow, yeah, they're really putting a lot into this show. And so, I just, Rick Derringer, you sent me that link through Facebook of the show that I was talking about.
Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Interview.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see, they're very, 70s, the music and everything definitely has 70s written all over it.
Definitely.
When you sent me that link, I literally watched all of it.
Yeah.
From beginning to end. And you could see that energy that they put into the show. Now, when you compare it to everything is so much more sophisticated nowadays. Yeah. It's really kind of out of context to
what's going on now.
Compare it to what's preceded that. Yeah. But you have to understand, they were like at the forefront of putting on shows, putting a lot of energy into the shows, going from one song to the next song, and doing this whole thing, and doing Rick Derringer doing guitar solos, and
Rick Derringer, oddly enough, he produced a lot of Edgar Winter albums, and he played on a lot of those albums, but this one particular, while Rick Derringer did produce it, the main guitar player on this was, of all people, if you even can believe this, is Ronnie Montrose. This was pre-Montrose, when he did that album with Sammy Hagar.
Yes, it is. So it's kind of like Montrose's first kind of, getting recognized as a great guitarist.
Oh, yeah. And Rick Derringer, I think, for most of other Edgar Winter albums he played on, and he's just, I think he's another guitar player who really doesn't get his dues, if you know what I mean. I mean, of course, he's a guitar hero and everybody knows who he is, but I think he should have been a much bigger star.
Well, he was highly recognized back in those days.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
you know, I mean, when you compare what he was doing on guitar, you know, with the people that have preceded him, you know, you go, well, you know, it's not up to the level of, like, say, you know, Eddie Van Halen, you know, and all of these other people. But you have to understand,
it was a different time.
He was before Eddie Van Halen. He was an influence on all of these people that preceded them, you know, in them wanting to take what they were doing to a higher level, because he was setting kind of a bar. And of course, when you set a bar, what is the next generation going to want to do? They're going to want to try to exceed that bar. But if you look at it now and you compare it, you know, you know, but, you know, he was blazing a trail.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Where preceding guitarists after were kind of, you know, following that trail and utilizing that trail as a bar to try to exceed and break barriers and things like that.
Yeah, and you know, the interesting thing too is Edgar Winter is one of those guys that, as talented as cat as he is, he's smart enough to also put in his band, you know, surround himself with other musicians that are equally just as talented. That's why, like in this album in particular, you got Rick Derringer, you got Edgar Winter, you got Ronnie Montrose. You know, what a powerhouse band that was. And of course, Edgar being the younger brother of the late great Johnny Winter, who was a great you know, guitar player in his own right. And they were both you know, obviously from Texas and known for playing like Texas blues. But interesting thing about Edgar Winter is he's one of these musicians who you really can't pinpoint. You can't say, you know, he's rock. He's a little bit of, you know, Texas blues, rhythm and blues, rock, you know, commercial rock, you know, even a little bit of jazz. And interestingly enough, I was interviewing a lead singer from a Rolling Stones tribute out here in L.A., and he was kind of telling me, oh yeah, you know, the Edgar Winter album came out before White Trash, because I was a real big fan of that. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy plays in a Rolling Stone tribute, and he's a fan of it. And he's telling, oh, you got to check this stuff out. I'll tell you, I went so much to the point of listening to stuff on YouTube, and I purchased the album. And the White Trash album that came before this is very different sounding. I mean, it's a lot closer to even elements of jazz and your boogie woogie like blues and stuff like that, and very different sounding. That's why I think maybe those early Edgar Winter albums weren't selling. The record company might have been telling him, hey Edgar, you know, we need a little something with more of a pop rock element, and I think he really you know, came to life on this album.
Well, you know, during the 70s, you know, I think one of those things that differentiates the decade of the 70s from the 80s is the 70s was, you know, much less, not saying it didn't exist, but it was much less about the look and all that, and it was much more about
the music,
stretching the boundaries musically, and there was a lot of pressure on the bands because the bar was being set so high in musicianship. In the 70s, you know, you had bands like Led Zeppelin, you had bands like Kansas, you had bands like Edgar Winter Group, you had, and it just goes on. And what's those one things that ties all of those bands together is just this extreme. Another band, yes.
Oh yeah.
An extremely high bar in level of musicianship.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Now, you know, the 80s became, you know,
much more about the look,
more about combining, you know, what you were doing musically and with the package of the look, because by then, this whole you know, Beatles, you know, everybody having their favorite member of the band and that kind of thing. And the 80s became more of that kind of a package where it was, you know, bands But it became a combination of the look and the music, and because I would imagine the record companies wanted to be able to promote more than just the music. They wanted to promote the music and the members of the band.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up. I was just gonna make that point because Edgar Winter, I don't mean this in mean way or anything, but he wasn't the greatest looking guy. He didn't really have the look, but he had the sound. I'll tell you, he had the songs, and I mean, he suffered a lot of health issues, and the main thing he suffered from was being albino. Which, if anybody doesn't know, that's where, if you've ever seen people that are really, really, I mean, they're whiter than white. They're whiter than a ghost, and a lot of times these people, they go out in the sun or anything, they get allergic. Somebody was telling me that Edgar Winter is actually like legally blind, and he'd have to have an assistant go, and a kind of assistant would go out and make public appearances, and he was signing things. So interestingly enough, he had that to deal with, but like you said, maybe that would have been something he had to deal more with if he'd been around in the 80s, but his heyday was in the 70s, which kind of, I guess, at the right time, but the cool thing, if you look at the story of what we're kind of talking about without him being an albino and all, and having all these health issues he was dealing with, he was able to kind of deal with it, and it didn't really make his career suffer at all, which is kind of cool,
Well, same with his brother Johnny. Both of them were albino, and Johnny, before he passed, he was like completely blind, and he would literally have to be walked up on the stage to go ahead and do his performances. Both brothers had the same difficulties, but yet
found success.
I think in an interview that we had before, I was mentioning how when you are a true musician, a true musician, if you're not playing music, there's a major hole in your life. And I think that the thing for both of those brothers was that it was music that allowed them to still be able to enjoy performing and have such a huge following that would allow them to have such long careers and have such a prestigious beholding by their peers.
Like they didn't let their health issues get in their way. They were successful in spite of it, and you gotta really admire that, And the other thing is kind of interesting that about the two guys being brothers is like you hear how the Van Halen brothers have said for years, Alex and Eddie, we got like a, we know what each other's thinking, musically, and we're just really tight musically, and we were able to bounce ideas off that way. And although the Winter brothers play with each other live from time to time, they appeared on each other's albums. It's cool that they were able to niche out their own separate careers.
I always to be honest with you, Johnny Winter was at the during the 70s was also very influential with me, because when I listened to Johnny Winter's music, I think the only album that I kind of
picked up,
checked out was Still Alive and Well.
Oh wow!
And to me, at that time in the early 70s, that music, seemed like rock music to me.
Talking to you, I hear you.
But now, as time, and of course me musically being more sophisticated, you listen to those albums, and it Johnny was very heavily blues influenced in his music and the instruments that he would play, because he was just an incredibly proficient slide guitarist. He was kind of at the forefront of making slide guitar part of popular music. And so, just like Edgar is highly revered amongst his peers, so was Johnny. In the whole blues arena, Johnny is blues royalty. So both of those guys were just their heyday were the 70s. But I remember as a kid being in a store that no longer existed. It was called Jimco.
I remember. Yeah, that's a. That's talking about our age.
It was kind of a department store where it had different sections in there.
Kind of like predated. I want to say
it even had grocery store in there. And when my parents would be grocery shopping, I would be wandering around into different departments, and they had a section of the store where they had musical instruments. And of course, where do you think I'm going to be?
Oh yeah.
And they have the musical instruments hanging from a display, up higher. And then down below the instruments, they had it all surrounded by albums. And I remember looking at still alive and well.
Oh wow.
And it's just I'm looking at Johnny Winter, and he looks so weird. And that was my first impression before I ever really heard the music. Is I was like, wow, who is that guy? Just the whole look from the album was very catching. And so, and of course, eventually I wound up, listening to it. And like I said, at that time, it's my first foray into his music. And, to me, I thought it was rock. But it, obviously is very, very, very heavy blues. But getting back to Edgar, their shows, were... different types of music. I think that's the reason why they didn't play all that much together. They did play, their brothers, of course. But they didn't play all that much together because the different avenues that Edgar were going down were pretty much everything else and much less blues. And then Johnny was going much more heavily into the blues direction.
And interesting enough, if you listen to any of the earlier Edgar Winter stuff, a lot of it was really a lot closer to jazz.
Yes, and of course, as a young kid, that jazz, a lot of people don't understand jazz, and I think we talked about that before too in a different interview.
We were talking about the improvisation. And
most of the time jazz goes over people's heads because they really don't understand music, and most people that gravitate, and not all people, there's gray areas in everything that I say. But, most people that gravitate towards jazz do understand music, and most of them will have a musical background because, when you do understand jazz, then you understand the level of difficulty that it takes to be able to play that style of music, because the level of musicianship required to be able to play that and play these crazy pieces of music, but yet all of the musicians know exactly where they are, and then the listener listens to it and they go, wow, that's just like way out there, but then all of a sudden they go back right into this particular thing that's like the signature part of the song. So there obviously is a structure to it. But most of jazz goes over the person that doesn't understand jazz, goes right over their head.
And I think Edgar Winter was a great improvisation of music. If you look at the simple fact that he was not just a lead singer. He played the sax, he played the keyboards, he played horns and stuff on his albums, and so he did a little bit of everything. And if you listen to this album we're talking about, they only come out at night, especially like something like Free Ride off of that. It's a great rockin' tune, like we were saying, and that's kind of what people get out of that album. But like I said, he kind of, even on this rock sounding stuff, he makes playing a sax kind of sound sexy, if you know what I mean. I mean, a lot of people, they think sax and rock music, oh man, come on. But if you kind of put this album on and you don't even worry about the fact that he's playing sax throughout the album or anything, it really doesn't matter, because it's just like you said, it's just great music.
Well, there you go, and I think you hit the head of the nail with the hammer on saxophone being a sexy instrument, because there's a lot of music that you'll see in sex scenes in music in movies.
Yeah.
Not talking about porn.
No, I hear you. But yeah,
the sex scene, especially
kind of musical
in
theme,
the '80s, where it just naturally, okay, there's the saxophone, in that particular scene. So you are 100% right about the saxophone having that, gravitating towards, heated scenes in movies and stuff like that, and how sexy of an instrument it really is. Yeah. But then again, when you listen to Edgar Winter playing, that's where his jazz roots really come out.
Oh yeah, no
because
doubt.
When you hear him playing that saxophone, everybody looks at Edgar Winter keyboards because he had it strapped around his neck, keyboard and Frankenstein and all of that stuff. But when you listen to him play the saxophone, that guy was a master, a virtuoso of the saxophone. So it's the level of difficulty to become an extremely proficient at one instrument. Yeah. And here you're looking at a guy like Edgar Winter, and he was proficient at many instruments.
Yeah, multi-instrumental guy, which just makes him, such a great musician. And it's one of the things that kind of impressed me the most. I'll give you another piece of trivia here, Gar. In 1985, David Lee Roth, when he first left Van Halen, he put out a 4-song cover EP, and it features of all people on 2 tracks. Edgar Winter, he plays on one of the singles, "Just a Gigolo." You may remember that tune. He plays saxophone, and he also plays saxophone and keyboards on another track called "Easy Street," which is oddly enough an Edgar Winter tune that was featured on the follow-up album to this, which was called "Shock Treatment," and the track is called "Easy Street."
Well, he had, Edgar Winter had a very, very long career, and his music has proceeded, even though he, isn't performing anymore, at least,
as much as he once was.
Nothing that I really know that much of it, because he's pretty high up there.
I was surprised when I got onto Wikipedia. I think it said he was like 70 years old, and so that would make sense, he's lived his life, and
he's getting pretty up there, and getting pretty sage in the years. Yeah. But his music is still being listened to today.
It's made its mark, Yeah, definitely.
There's just I think. Like I was saying earlier in this particular interview, when you are a musician. Mm-hmm. And you are able. It's hard enough to be a musician and have some semblance of success in the industry. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hard enough just to do that. Yeah. To have there's a ton of one-hit wonders, and it's hard enough to just achieve that.
Yeah.
But then when you're talking about, not only being able to achieve, that, but to go beyond it and have a hugely stellar career, even though by today it's completely forgotten.
Oh yeah, you know.
But yet, even to eclipse that by having your music still being played, like, you know, many decades later, and the music still stands up. It's, you know, nobody can say that Free Ride is a bad song.
Oh no.
It's a very uplifting song, and you know, it gets your toe tapping, and it just gets your body swaying.
Yeah, and you know, let me ask you, Gar, how much of, you know, you having to market your own band and knowing what goes into that, you know, when this album came out and you saw it in the store or whatever, how much of, you know, the marketing, the way it was displayed on the store, probably seeing TV commercials for it, or even hearing Free Ride or Frankenstein on the radio, how much did that have to do with you wanting to go out and get the album?
You know, most of what would, you know, get me to, you know, get the album and immerse myself, because back in the 70s, that's, as a young musician, that's exactly what you're doing, because, you know, you're in the learning stage, so you're wanting to challenge yourself, and what's the best way to challenge yourself? By people like that, of that high level of musicianship. You know, when you can learn a piece by these guys that are that proficient, it's just one of those things where you can prove to yourself, I can do this. You see what I'm saying? But it was mostly the radio. You know, hearing the stuff on the radio, and oh man, I've got to look into this more. I've got to see what this is all about.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you know, there was just so many. You know, the 70s was heavily laden with extremely high level of musicianship. You know, just like Edgar Winter, I remember, you know, as a young kid, you know, kind of the young, you know, 70s is kind of like your in between the hippies of the 60s and the hair bands of the 80s. But the 70s was kind of like a transitional decade, and it had like a hippie influence on the generation that was, you know, during that time. There was still a lot of hippiness kind of stuff going on, and it was really popular as a young guy to go to stores that would sell secondhand clothes. And there was this place in La Puente, I believe it was called Funky but Damn Near New.
I know exactly what you're talking about. They used to, cause my aunt used to live over in that area, and we'd go visit my aunt and my cousins, and they'd have like these. You'd go like they had used jeans or new jeans, but mostly old jeans.
And I remember being in that store, you know, looking at the clothes and looking for, you know, the hippie style clothes, that whole kind of stuff that was, you know, going on in the 70s. And of course they had a big stereo, you know, that was, you know, pretty powerful you know, for that time period. And of course they're playing, you know, all the music that was going on during that time that appealed to the young person of my age, because everybody that's working in the store is people like me. And I remember in that store hearing for the first time Lucky Man.
Oh wow.
By Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And of course, you know, while I'm looking through the store, you know, of course I had smoked a, you know, bit of weed, and here I am listening to, you know, and Keith Emerson, you know, was, you know, playing that stuff, and it just sounded so trippy to me, and I was just going, who is that? Oh my gosh, I've got to check this out. And then, you know, of course, just like Edgar Winter, you know, here I am now diving into this, and that's what I was doing in the 70s. I would hear stuff in different places, and of course, you know, the radio ruled supreme back in those days, so that was your biggest source for hearing music. But then there was other places that you would become exposed, and then that was later on, I would see videos of Emerson, Lake and Palmer playing, and there's Keith Emerson doing something that nobody had ever done before. He's playing 2 keyboards at the same time.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. That's just amazing.
And so you're watching him, and he's got one hand on one keyboard on this side, and then on the other side of his body, he's got another keyboard on the other side, and he's doing this whole, getting 2 completely different sounds with each hand.
And the thing with watching someone like that is, you're amazed, and then you're like, okay, I'm not just listening to this guy play the 2 pianos, but I'm watching it. I just cannot believe what I'm seeing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then also think about the level of creativeness of the thinking up. Well, what if I get this sound with this hand and get this completely different sound? It's blazing new trails.
Again, that's
what people were doing in the 70s.
Again,
all of these, extremely high-level musicians were all blazing new trails, doing things that other musicians previous to them had never done.
And see, that's where the improvisation, like you said, comes in, because it's I want to, when I go to see a live show or something like that, I don't want to just hear the record the same way I do in my when I'm listening to the album in my room at home. I want to be entertained. And like you said, when you have an entertainer like that, it's kind of like, we're here to entertain you. We're going to give you a show you will not soon forget. That is what it is all about.
Well, yeah, of course, when when these musicians would play the music, that same stuff that you hear on the radio, of course, they're so familiar with it, and their musicianship is so high level, of course they're going to take liberties with the song and show you, how much farther they can actually go with the music.
And that's why, like you were saying, rock radio was God back then, because you could listen to a rock radio station and you could hear everything back then, from Tom Petty and the Eagles to maybe a Deep Purple and a Led Zeppelin song, all on the same station, because they weren't into doing stuff like really heavily programming things like they do now. We're only going to play stuff that's in the top 40 or whatever. It was much easier to kind of hear a lot of different types of rock music on one station back then.
Well, the radio for many, many decades, all the way up until recently, was the soundtrack of our lives.
Oh, so true, my friend. Yeah.
And now, because levels and diversity and things available to the public for entertainment has become so diverse. Now music has become much. It's still there, but it's become much less of that soundtrack
to our lives
of the newer generation's lives. So, the only thing that stays the same in life is change.
Oh yeah, and and I will just add this, as far as rock radio not being what it once was. I think a lot of a reason for that is, like you said, like if you look at something how just instant download, being able to instantly download something. There used to, back in 70s, which is the time we're talking. Like you were saying, there's an anticipation. You'd see the ad for the upcoming album in a rock magazine. You'd see it on maybe a TV ad for it. There was that anticipation where a lot of kids these days, they don't even know what a record is, let alone a record store, and they'll tell you, I don't want to waste my money on the whole album. I'll just buy the single or whatever song's on the radio currently. And so there's a lot of that going on these days where. A lot of people they just want everything kind of instantly, and that's the reason that's going on. And then Free Ride, we've been talking a lot about Frankenstein, because those are the 2 big hits off this album. And sadly, this album is kind of a double-edged sword. It's in a lot of ways it's become Edgar Winter's legacy, which isn't a bad thing. But I say that because I will tell people in regards to this album, they only come out at night. If you listen to it, there's really from top to bottom, they're all great tunes, but some of the other tunes that stand out to me, I like the first track, which is called Hang Around. Second track, When It Comes. It's just really all good time, fun, rock-oriented music. But like if you listen to the lyrics to the second track here, When It Comes, I don't want to say what I think it's about, but it's just a fun song. And that's the thing about these are great rock tunes on this record we're talking about. And it's not really, they're not trying to send us a message about how to save the world or anything. It's just good, fun time music. And sometimes that's all you need, you know?
Well, you know, I just feel so lucky
Yeah.
to have been born when I was born.
Oh, yeah.
Be able to experience the 60s, be able to experience the 70s, and be able to, by the time the 80s hit, my musicianship had, you know, reached a level where I was good enough to perform with groups and you know, stretch my ability, you know, use everything that I did previous to that to stretch my abilities and use it in performance, you know, in the performance format. So I just feel so lucky to have been born during that time period, and I just feel so lucky to live where I actually lived, because there were so many really good musicians that were just like me, you know, that loved music so much and had done the same thing, stretched their abilities and become to the level where they could perform and you know, just to go see all of these musicians and, you know, rub elbows with, you know, a bunch of these people, and just to, you know, to live in an area where there's such a concentration of very, very good musicians, and, you know, and, you know, getting back to, you know, how hard it is to have some kind of level of success in music, because the bar is so high in reaching that success. Even though you know, the area that I grew up in had such a high concentration of musicians, there's only a very small handful of musicians from that area that went on to success, even though there were a ton of musicians.
I mean, we talked about that in the previous interview, and it's just it's amazing, you know, when a guy like you is able to grow up around that area and where these musicians came from, and it's kind of seen the, you know, what later became of their musical careers. So it must have been a great time to grow up around that, you know. And getting back to, you know, the song "Free Ride," I think it's interesting because when you hear the term "free ride," most time people think, oh, that's like a freeloader. That's somebody that, you know, living off his parents or family members or something, doesn't have a job. But, you know, which I'm sure you know, Edgar, you listen to this track, especially if you go back to that clip we found on YouTube of Don Kirshner's rock concert with Edgar Winter. You know, when they were playing that song "Free Ride," it's kind of like the band saying, the whole band inviting the fans, you know, hey, come on and, you know, come and see us play. Come to the show. Be a part of the show. You know, come on a free ride of fun with us. You know, that's really what that's all about. You know.
Well, you know, life was simple. You know, back in those days, much more simple than it is nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, where you know, the focus for everybody, you know, at that time was you know, enjoying music, and it's just. You know, there was, you know, L.A. was a very different place back then, you know, back in the 70s.
I mean, back then, I mean, you go anywhere near like Hollywood Sunset Strip. I mean, they had rock shows like at all the clubs, like almost every night. They're not doing that so much, obviously, you know, these days. But you could see all kinds of characters just walking the streets of Hollywood, and you're sure to be entertained no matter which of those shows you went to. But, you know, Hollywood is not what it once was. A lot of those musicians, those 80s rockers, are moving to Las Vegas, and they're a lot more like LA used to be, you know.
Well, I mean, that's the only thing. Everything's going to change, and who knows
what's next?
what the future of music is going to be. That's one thing. Being on this earth for as long as I've been, because I'm getting pretty sage myself. Yeah. One thing I've learned is nobody has a crystal ball, and nobody really truly knows, what changes and what is going to happen, what could be that spark for whatever is going to be the new thing. I don't feel I don't feel that music is going to be gone. No. And I don't feel that music is, there's just so many people that I see making posts on Facebook, about how music nowadays sucks, and it's nothing compared to, the generations previous and everything like that. I just see, saying things like that is not very supportive, to the creativity of the newest generation. And when the previous generation is not being supportive towards the next generation, just because what the next generation is doing different from what the previous generation is doing, it kind of has a stifling effect. Yeah, and it also creates a rebellion.
Oh, so true. Yeah.
And one of the things about music, which has always been the tying thread to younger generations and whatever is popular to them, is there's always that element of rebellion. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying is there just seems to be this fertileness for some kind of rebellion to occur. Yeah. And but then again, that rebellion is also going to result in a rejection towards the previous generation. But that was all, really it's the previous generation not being supportive towards it that's going to create that rebellion. And these following generations are going to want to create something that's their own. And, even though a lot of people don't particularly care for it, that is the biggest fuel for rap music.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean,
rap music is truly a rebellion towards the music previous. Yeah. They're trying to come up with something new that they can put their own stamp on, that this is ours. Our generation, this is ours. Yeah. And we're rejecting the previous generations, what was popular to them. Yeah, yeah. That's a crucial element to the breeding of whatever is new that's going to rise like a phoenix.
Yeah, I think there's so much truth to what you're saying, and part of that is I think also people got to be a little more willing to open their ears. Like don't be one of these guys that I only listen to rap, I only listen to hard rock, I only listen to metal. Be willing to open your ears. I mean, people maybe call it guilty pleasure. I'll give you a perfect example. Well, I do tend to kind of listen to hard rock and metal music, but I open my ears in the sense that I'm not ashamed to say I have an appreciation for what a band like the Eagles did. I can't deny that I've heard these are classic rock tunes I've heard all my life on the radio. I cannot deny that I've got all those Eagles songs in my head, and I find myself oftentimes hearing it on the radio in the car and singing along. I just can't deny what great songs they are, and I think you gotta first of all be a little more willing to open your ears to say, I have to admit that's a great song, Perfect example, too, what you're talking about is, I interviewed this guy just the other day from this new band, up-and-coming band. They're called The Lows. This black guy named Angelo Coppola, and and I haven't had a chance to hear the whole album, but I listened to this band's single. It's called "Love Will Find a Way." You can find it on YouTube, but it's just a great little pop rock kind of tune, real upbeat. It's a real happy song. It's called, again, "Love Will Find a Way." And I told the guy, I got to tell you, I haven't had a chance to hear the rest of your album, but based on that one song, it got so much in my head that I'm kind of an instant fan. I want to go and get the album now and check the rest of it out. And he's like, oh, what? That's really cool to hear. But, again, this is a band I'm just hearing for the first time, and the song really stuck in my head for a while. It was just that good. I had to admit it out loud,
Well, there's, it just seems to be, my particular generation, is kind of getting stuck in a time warp.
Yeah.
And there is good music.
Yeah.
Out there.
You just have to find it or be willing to go looking for it. Yeah.
There are good bands out there. There are bands that the younger generation is gravitating towards. I'd say it's kind of trippy because there's a band right now that that's very popular. With my daughter's age group.
Okay.
And they're called Rival Sons.
Oh, I've heard of them. Yeah, and people kind of compare them to modern day Zeppelin. Yeah.
They are a very good band.
Wow.
And the lead singer, this is the trippiest thing, but the lead singer for Rival Sons, I used to be his boss when I used to work at a huge musical instrument retail company.
Oh, wow.
And so we worked together. When I used to work out in San Bernardino.
Oh, wow!
and at that time, I just remember his dad was very, very supportive of him because his dad also played guitar and sang and music was a big passion of his dad. So when his dad would come in to our work, you could see how much his dad supported his son.
Oh, that's cool.
And Jay, I remember Jay would, work it out with the higher ups to be able to borrow an acoustic amplifier so he could take his acoustic guitar and play at small places just by himself, honing down his skills as a singer and guitar player and performing in audiences, honing down his skills and being able to talk to the people listening to him perform, because that's a big part of being the lead singer, having that rapport with the audience.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was around him when, way back in the mid-'90s when he was doing all of that, honing his skills as a performer. And now, fast forward, haven't talked to him in how many decades, but, now here he is, having, recognition and success.
Yeah, good for him.
And you have to really hand it to them, because right now it's very difficult to have any kind of success, because there is no radio airplay to generate this whole thing, and they're having to generate it all on their own, but yet they are.
Yeah, see, that's the thing.
Having some semblance of a success, and that's just one example of there are good bands out there. There are good song craftsmen
Yeah. You just have to
people that are coming up with good music. I think the biggest thing is it's extremely difficult for the people now to be able to get their music out to masses, and then formats that are kind of taking over, which is very different from my generation. Is my generation, all we had to do was turn on the soundtrack to our lives, which was the radio. But nowadays, in order to reach audiences, you have to subscribe to something. Say like a Sirius or things like that. Which means that there's a whole gazillion people out there that maybe don't have the finances where they're going to be able to justify spending, that money to subscribe to that, and that's a whole audience out there that's getting completely missed by these bands. So it's very difficult for these bands to get their music out to audiences, and the climate is very different. I can't predict, because like I said, nobody's got a crystal ball. Who knows how, but something, I just think we're in the wild, wild west.
Who would have predicted, if you look at 2020 so far, who would have predicted going through all this COVID-19 stuff and the recent events of the last, few weeks? I mean, it's like you said, it's kind of a crazy world right now, but we're living in it, and we just got to find a way to deal with everything that's going on. But if you don't mind me getting a little personal for a minute, Gar, you mentioned you had a daughter. I was curious if your daughter had ever, over the years, she'd obviously probably been to many of your shows and seen you play live, but did she ever show any desire, to be a musician or get into music?
Well, just the typical thing that used to be said to me when she was, little and she was growing up is, why don't you get her into music? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And all that stuff like that. And as a parent, I just, nobody ever pushed music on me.
It's just what you fell into.
In fact, as a kid, when I was growing up, my parents were very against me playing music, and there's my rebellion.
There you go.
That element of rebellion again. There was no way that music was going to get squashed in me, and I learned how to play music in spite of their disapproval. But for her growing up, because I just didn't see that as a healthy relationship with your parent, as me being a parent pushing it on my daughter. There was a time where she experimented with music, and kind of touching it, getting her fingers in it. But it was her decision, and as long as it was her decision, of course I'm 100% supportive. But I became supportive of many other things that she decided to get her fingers into also.
Oh, good for you.
And as a parent, all I wanted to do was help facilitate her finding her own way
in the world,
in her own life.
There you go. It'd be a much better world if more people had that philosophy. So good for you there. Now, before we wrap this up, Gar, I just want to kind of end on this note. I want to share with people, like I was kind of mentioning throughout the interview, my kind of experience with Edgar Winter for most of my life was hearing those two songs, like Frankenstein and Free Ride. Those are like two of my all-time favorite songs, like I mentioned. And oddly enough, that's kind of become Edgar Winter's legacy. And that's like I said, a double-edged sword, because very much like with the band Extreme, they had that hit with More Than Words, and people think, that's all they did. There's much more to Extreme, just like there's much more to Edgar Winter, as I've been discovering over this last month. I talked to you and I talked to somebody else about Edgar Winter, and I went and I actually purchased some of the albums, and much to my surprise, I'm I'm kind of discovering the rest of Edgar Winter's legacy, kind of late in life, but I'm enjoying it. And I urge other people who've listened to this kind of do the same thing. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy vinyls. You can go on YouTube and check this stuff out. And I think that's kind of a cool way to, kind of like we said, kind of check stuff out that you're not really aware of. You might pleasantly be surprised. Hey, it's not such bad. Oh, there's more to this guy than free ride, you know?
I always suggest to anyone that loves music, there's more to life than just being a country music fan, or a metal music fan, or a blues music fan. To me, and this even goes back to me as a young kid back in the 1970s when I was getting my feet wet and trying to learn my ropes and everything. Diversity, will allow anyone to have a better outlook and education on music. Because there is more to life than just one
thing,
outlook or one thing. There, when the more diversified that you become at the information that you allow yourself to be able to look at, and exposing yourself, the more well-rounded of a human being you become. And that becomes, what I just said there can even be taken to a much broader extent. But me being a musician, of course, I'm going to talk about music. Diversity in music that you expose yourself to will allow you yourself. You never know what you're going to discover that all of a sudden is going to become a passion. And if you never allow yourself to be exposed to it, you could be completely missing an opportunity to have a beautiful passion about something.
And let me ask you on a final question for this today. Do you think the fact that your influences are so diverse, everything we've discussed from Black Sabbath, Jethro Tull, yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Edgar Winter, do you think because of that you've been exposed yourself to so much different types of music over the years that when you started writing your own original tunes, it made you that much better of a songwriter because you've been exposed to such diverse types of music?
Absolutely. All of that music that I exposed myself to in the 70s when I was in my learning stage had a huge impact on my ability to play the instrument. But the number one hugely impactful thing that happened to me that prepared me to do original music was that first band that I was ever in that was all nothing but improvisation.
There you go.
When I first got together with those musicians, we didn't know any material, and the guy that got put this whole jam session together, it was all, hey, do you want to jam? So we just started. The drummer started playing a beat, and I started playing a bass line around it. That I was just feeling off of being influenced by him, and now next thing you know, the guitar player is riffing on some guitar stuff that's completely different than what I'm doing, but it's all fusing together, and it clicked. But I will say this, that when we did that first jam session to a year later, when we were still playing together, we became so good at improvising that we could do things musically and know with no discussion at all. Just by eye contact, we would know what we were feeling, and we would do things that would just completely trip people out. Like we would be playing, nothing was ever discussed, nothing was ever said, and then all of a sudden we'd go to a complete stop, abrupt stop.
You're that in sync. Wow, that's amazing.
And then we would feel it by eye contact, and then just go right back into the flurry.
It must have kind of tripped you out too. Like I imagine back then, you would record some of these jams, and when you listen back to it, it's like, oh man, look at what we did. Wow, never heard anything like that.
Yes, we became so good at improvising. A natural chemistry occurred over that time period, and we had all became so good. And my ability to come up with stuff became more and more and more, because the more you improvise, the more you're expanding your musical abilities. Now you're coming up with different bass lines, and you're experimenting. You're going out in this direction, or you're going out in another direction, or you're going in this there's so many different directions that you can go in, and next thing you know, my ability to improvise from the very beginning compared to the end, it's just became my musical vocabulary expanded incredibly. So that was the number one thing. The music that I was exposing myself previous to that was if I could learn how to master this, then I could be good enough. You see what I mean? But when you're improvising, and now your musical vocabulary becomes so much more expanded, it's like working out. I had weightlifters muscles by the time I was at the end of that.
Wow.
As far as musical abilities, and to come up with things on the spot. And then now you're jumping into doing originals. Now you have an ability. Somebody's like, oh, okay, well, I've got this and I need a bass line to it. Now you have the ability, well, let's try this. That's not working. Okay, let's try that. Now you have the ability to bring things to the table.
And I'm sure that plays a big role in the success of what you're doing these days with Appetite for Destruction, because although it's not original music and it's a lot more rock and roll theater, as we say, and you're paying tribute to Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses, you don't want to become a carbon copy where every show is like the previous night's show before. That's why, like, when you get up on stage, like you're saying, as a lead singer, you got to talk to the audience. You got to be able to improvise. You don't want to say the same thing every night. You want to maybe have a different set list, so you're not playing the same song. So there is that improvisation when people come from one show to the next.
Well, the things that I'm doing nowadays still stretch my boundaries and are taking me into areas that I'm not strong in. When I first started, I had absolutely no experience in, and of course, I'm, even at my sage age, I'm still growing, but in different ways. What I'm doing nowadays that's really pushing me, and just like I was doing back in the 70s, but I'm doing it now, but in different ways, is I'm not just a musician. I'm a singer, but I'm also an actor.
Very, very, very true. But again, like I said,
that is the thing that is expanding my horizons now. I keep getting better and better and better at acting, and it just really gives you an appreciation to watching an actor in a movie when they're portraying a particular person, and then you're those are the mannerisms of the person that he's portraying in this movie. Those are the inflections in how he talks and how he's bringing that person to life in this movie. And the better I become as an actor, which is new fertile ground for me to learn and become better and better and better. So this is the area that I'm expanding in now. In being an actor and portraying a particular person, because me as a person, I have absolutely no mannerisms or anything, that in common with Axl.
And that's so true, because
there's a strong, just as strong of a drive in me now to become good at that as there was when I was a kid in wanting to stretch my abilities as a musician way back then.
Yeah, we'll just let you know, Gar, somebody that's followed you over the years, you do an awesome job of portraying Axl Rose, but what I think is cool is you don't have the ego of attitude that, okay, I've mastered my craft, I don't have to study or practice anymore. You're great at what you do, don't get me wrong, but I think it's great that you're continuing to do what you do. And like you said, you could easily put on, I'm just going to put on a wig and try to look like Axl. You wear the same type of clothes. It's more than just putting on a wig, and very true. And that's what a great actor I think you are, because like you said, you could just stop at just putting on a wig and I'll try to look as much like Axl Rose as I can. But you go the extra mile, and that's why people come to a show to see you in the band, because you guys go that extra mile. It's more than just putting on a wig to you. You want to put on a great show for people that are paying their hard-earned money to come see you and your band, and you're great. You're great at what you do,
Believe me, I'm not done. There's much more room to improve.
Yeah.
I'm not satisfied.
And that's a great attitude to have.
What I'm doing right now, as far as my abilities as an actor, and so I'm taking the same necessary steps, to do this part of what I do, and so any person that whatever it is that you do, if you think that you're there, you've completely stagnated.
Oh yeah, I agree, and I would just
flatlined.
I'll say I love the picture you posted recently of you and your grandson, like just in your own private time. It's cool to see that, because it shows all the hard work that does go into what you do, because you do look so different from Axl Rose than you do when you're on stage. But that just goes to show people all the hard work that you put into what you do. And I think we're going to end it there, my friend, unless you have anything else to say. So thanks again, Gar, for doing this. As always, I've enjoyed talking to you.
I can't thank you enough, Jason. This is, it's really an honor that I hope that. I hope that I inspire people. I hope I give people an insight. I think you have. And to, even if you're just, looking to kind of get, a view of the past or whatever. I hope people enjoy this, because it's really an honor that you even want to interview me.
Well, like I told you, Gar, before you wrap this up, a big reason for that is just because of the fact that your influences are so diverse. But thanks once again for doing this, Gar. If you could just